I came home a day early to discover 76 people having a wedding reception in my backyard. Sister said, "Surprise. We borrowed your house for my big day." Mom added, "You should be honored we chose your property." Dad insisted, "We didn't tell you because what's yours is ours." Groom laughed, "Thanks for the free venue." I quietly did this instead. 2 weeks later, I had 105 missed calls and my sister was screaming. My name is Haley, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a marketing manager for a tech company, which requires frequent business trips. I own a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a large backyard that I've spent 3 years landscaping to perfection. It's my sanctuary, my pride and joy, and apparently, according to my family, their personal event venue. Let me back up and give you some context about my family dynamics. My younger sister Lauren is 25 and has always been the golden child. She's the type who expects everything to revolve around her, and unfortunately, our parents have always enabled this behavior. My mom, Karen, and dad, Robert, have consistently prioritized Lauren's wants over everyone else's needs, including mine. They borrowed money from me countless times, used my credit cards for emergencies, and somehow always expected me to be grateful for the privilege of helping them. Lauren got engaged to her boyfriend Ben 6 months ago. Ben is? Well, let's just say he's perfectly matched to my sister's entitled personality. He works part-time at a sporting goods store and spends most of his free time playing video games. Lauren works as a part-time barista and has been planning this elaborate wedding that, as I later discovered, they couldn't actually afford. I had been on a business trip in Chicago for a week, helping launch a new product campaign. The trip was supposed to end on Sunday, but we wrapped up early, and I managed to catch a Friday afternoon flight home. I was excited to get back to my house, maybe order some takeout, and spend the weekend relaxing in my beautiful backyard. As my Uber pulled into my driveway at around 4 p.m., I immediately noticed something was wrong. There were cars everywhere, parked on my lawn, blocking my driveway, lined up and down the street. I could hear music and laughter coming from my backyard. My first thought was that maybe my neighbors were having a party and had overflow parking, but as I got closer to my front door, I realized the sound was definitely coming from my property. I walked around to my backyard gate, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There were at least 76 people in my backyard, I counted later. There were white folding chairs arranged in rows, a makeshift altar decorated with flowers from my own garden, and a full reception set up with tables, a DJ booth, and a buffet line. People were dancing on my patio, kids were running around my carefully maintained flower beds, and someone had set up a bar station right next to my outdoor kitchen. And there, in the middle of it all, was my sister Lauren in a white wedding dress, dancing with Ben in a black tuxedo. I stood there for a moment, completely stunned. This wasn't just a casual family gathering, this was a full wedding reception happening in my backyard without my knowledge or permission. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. I took videos of the crowd, the decorations, the setup, everything. Something told me I was going to need evidence of this later. I walked through the crowd, and people started noticing me. Some looked confused, others waved like they knew me. I finally made my way to where Lauren and Ben were standing near the cake table. Yes, they had a 3-tier wedding cake set up on my patio table. "Lauren," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this?" She turned around with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. "Haley, you're home early. Surprise. We borrowed your house for my big day." She threw her arms around me like this was the most normal thing in the world. Before I could respond, my mother appeared beside us. Karen was wearing a navy blue dress and holding a glass of champagne. "Oh honey, you're back. You should be honored we chose your property. Your backyard is just perfect for weddings. We've been telling everyone how generous you are to let us use it." I stared at her. "Let you use it?" I didn't know anything about this. That's when my father joined the conversation. Robert walked over with Ben, both of them laughing about something. "Haley, there's our homeowner. We didn't tell you because, well, what's yours is ours, right? Family shares everything." Ben clapped me on the shoulder like we were old buddies. "Thanks for the free venue. This place is amazing. You've got great taste in landscaping." I looked around at all of them, my sister glowing in her wedding dress, my parents acting like this was completely normal, and Ben treating my home like his personal property. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked Lauren. "Oh, about 3 months. We looked at so many venues, but they were all so expensive. Then Mom suggested your place, and it was perfect. We knew you'd want to help, and since you were going to be out of town, we figured it would be easier to just handle everything ourselves." "You planned a wedding at my house for 3 months without telling me?" Lauren's smile faltered slightly. "We wanted it to be a surprise. And honestly, we knew you might stress about the details, so we thought it would be better to just take care of everything." I looked around my backyard again. My prize-winning roses were being used as decorations, someone had moved my outdoor furniture around, and there were muddy footprints all over my deck. I noticed that they'd even hung string lights from my trees and set up a photo booth area near my vegetable garden. "How many people are here?" I asked. 76, Lauren said proudly. We kept the list small, just close family and friends. 76 people who were using my bathroom, eating food prepared in my kitchen, drinking from my glassware, and celebrating a wedding I knew nothing about. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. "I need to talk to you privately," I told Lauren. "Oh, can it wait? I'm about to cut the cake." "No, it can't wait." Lauren's expression shifted to annoyance. "Fine, but make it quick. This is my wedding day." We walked toward my back door, and I saw that they'd completely rearranged my living room to create a bridal suite area. Lauren's makeup and hair supplies were spread across my coffee table, and there were wedding dress bags hanging from my curtain rods. "Lauren, I can't believe you did this." "Did what?" "Shared a special moment with my family?" "You threw a wedding at my house without asking me." "Haley, don't be dramatic. It's just one day, and everyone's having such a beautiful time. Look how happy everyone is." "That's not the point. This is my home." Lauren's face hardened. "You know what, Haley? You're being really selfish right now. This is supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and you're trying to ruin it over what? Some grass and flowers? They'll grow back." "It's not about the grass, Lauren. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you planned an entire wedding at my house without my permission. We're family. We don't need permission. Mom and Dad said you'd understand." I realized that arguing with Lauren in that moment wasn't going to accomplish anything. She was clearly not going to see my perspective, and I had 76 wedding guests in my backyard who were probably wondering where the bride had gone. "You're right," I said finally. "It's your wedding day. We'll talk about this later." Lauren's smile returned immediately. "I knew you'd understand. You're the best sister ever." She hugged me again and ran back outside to rejoin her party. I stood in my living room, looking at the chaos around me, and made a decision. I wasn't going to ruin Lauren's wedding day by causing a scene. But I also wasn't going to let this slide. I spent the next few hours quietly documenting everything. I took photos of every single setup detail, every piece of my property that had been used or moved. I made a list of everything I could see that belonged to me: my dishes, my glassware, my outdoor furniture, my decorations. I estimated the number of people and took note of the vendors they'd hired: the DJ, the caterer, the florist. Around 7 p.m., I approached the caterer during a quiet moment. Her name was Jennifer, and she seemed like a professional who had probably seen her share of family drama. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Haley, the homeowner. Can I ask you a few questions about the catering arrangement?" "Of course. Your family was so excited about this event. Your sister mentioned that you were generously providing the venue." "Right. Can you tell me what the arrangement was for payment and setup?" Jennifer looked a little confused. "Well, your sister paid a deposit, but the balance is due at the end of the event. She said the family would handle the final payment together." "What's the total cost?" "For 76 people, with the menu they selected, it's $3,200. I nodded and thanked her. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. Around 9 p.m., I found the DJ during one of his breaks. His name was Marcus, and he'd been playing a good mix of music that had kept everyone dancing. "Great party," I told him. "I'm Haley, the homeowner." "Nice to meet you." "Yeah, your sister knows how to throw a party. Beautiful setup out here." "What was the arrangement for your payment?" Marcus pulled out his phone to check his notes. "Your sister paid half upfront, and the remaining $800 is due tonight. She said her family would take care of it." I was starting to see a pattern. By 10 p.m., the party was winding down, but there were still about 30 people lingering, helping themselves to the bar and continuing to dance. I found Lauren and Ben near the cake table, both looking exhausted but happy. "Beautiful wedding," I told them. "You two look great together." "Thank you so much, Haley," Lauren gushed. "This has been the most perfect day. I can't believe how well everything came together." "Speaking of everything coming together, how are you handling the vendor payments?" Lauren and Ben exchanged a look. "Well, actually, we were hoping the family could help with some of the final costs," Lauren said. "The caterer and DJ need their final payments tonight." "How much are we talking about?" "It's about $4,000 total," Ben said. "We paid deposits, but with the venue being free, we thought the family could cover the rest as our wedding gift." There it was. They hadn't just used my house without permission, they planned for my family to pay for their wedding. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad about this?" "We mentioned it earlier," Lauren said. "They seem fine with it. I found my parents near the bar, both of them looking like they'd had a few drinks. When I approached them about the vendor payments, their responses were exactly what I expected. "Well, we assumed you'd want to contribute," my mother said. "It's your sister's wedding, and you provided the venue." "We're a little tight on money right now," my father added. "But I'm sure we can all figure something out together." I realized that not only had they used my house without permission, but they'd also planned for me to pay for the privilege. The entitlement was staggering. I went back inside and started making some phone calls. I called my lawyer, Martin, who I'd worked with when buying my house. Even though it was late on a Friday, he answered. "Haley, how was your business trip?" "It's been interesting, Martin. I need some quick legal advice. If someone throws an event at your house without your permission, what are your rights as a homeowner?" "That's a very specific question. Are you dealing with trespassers?" "It's my family. They threw a wedding in my backyard while I was out of town. 76 people, vendors, the whole thing. I came home to find it in progress." "Jesus, Haley. That's quite a situation. Legally, it's still trespassing, even if it's family. You have every right to remove them from your property. You're also not liable for any costs or damages they incurred without your permission. What if they've damaged my property or used my belongings? You can document everything and potentially pursue compensation. Do you have evidence of the unauthorized use?" "I've been taking photos and videos all evening." "Good. Keep documenting. And Haley? You don't owe them anything, not money, not permission after the fact, nothing. This is your property." After I hung up with Martin, I made another call to my friend Megan, who works in event planning. I explained the situation and asked her about typical costs for a wedding of this size. "Haley, for 76 people with catering, DJ, flowers, and decorations, they're looking at probably $8,000 to $12,000 total. If they used your backyard as a free venue, they saved at least $3,000 to $5,000 just on the location. What about damages to landscaping and property? For that many people on residential property? You're probably looking at lawn repair, possible plant replacement, cleaning costs. Easily $1,000 to $2,000 in restoration." By 11 p.m., most of the guests had left, but the vendors were still waiting for payment, and my family was still expecting someone else to handle it. Lauren and Ben were getting increasingly stressed about the money situation, and my parents were trying to figure out how to split costs they clearly couldn't afford. I watched this unfold for another hour before I made my decision. I approached the caterer and DJ separately and paid their final balances myself, $4,000 total. I told them both that there had been a family miscommunication about payments, and I took care of it to avoid any awkwardness on what was supposed to be a celebration. Lauren and Ben were incredibly relieved and grateful. They thanked me profusely and promised they'd pay me back as soon as possible. My parents also expressed their gratitude and said they'd help contribute to paying me back. But I wasn't done. After everyone left and the vendors packed up, I spent until 3 a.m. documenting every single detail of the damage to my property. Trampled flower beds, moved furniture, stains on my deck, mud tracked through my house, food and drink spills on my carpets. I took photos of everything and wrote detailed notes. I also spent time researching the costs of everything they'd used. My dishes, glassware, linens, outdoor furniture, decorations, utilities, landscaping damage, I calculated every single expense. The next morning, I got to work on my plan. First, I called a professional cleaning service and scheduled them to come on Monday to deep clean my house and carpets. Cost, $600. Then I called the landscaping company to assess and repair the damage to my yard. They couldn't come out until Tuesday, but gave me an estimate of $1,200 to $1,500 based on my description. I also called my insurance company to report the unauthorized use of my property. They told me that while my homeowner's insurance might not cover the cleaning and landscaping costs, I should document everything in case I decided to pursue legal action. On Monday morning, I drafted a detailed invoice for Lauren and Ben. It included venue rental for my backyard, $4,000, the amount I'd researched for similar spaces, use of my house for bridal preparation, $500, use of my dishes, glassware, and linens, $300, utilities for 76 people, water, electricity, trash, $200, landscaping damage repair, $1,500, professional cleaning services, $600, vendor payments I covered, $4,000, total, $11,100. I also included a detailed breakdown of each cost, comparable market rates, and photos of all the damage and unauthorized use. But I didn't send it yet. Instead, I decided to take a different approach. I was going to give them exactly 2 weeks to contact me about paying back the $4,000 I'd covered for their vendors. Not as a gift, not as a family contribution, but as a loan that they'd promised to repay. I had a feeling they weren't going to follow through, and I wanted to see just how entitled they really were. For 2 weeks, I didn't hear a word from Lauren, Ben, or my parents about the money. Not a thank you text, not a call to discuss payment plans, nothing. It was like they'd completely forgotten that I'd paid $4,000 of their wedding expenses. But I wasn't forgotten completely. During those 2 weeks, I heard through the grapevine about how Lauren was telling everyone about her perfect backyard wedding and how generous her family had been. She was posting photos on social media of my backyard, talking about her dream venue and how everything had worked out exactly as planned. She was taking full credit for the beauty of my landscaping, the layout of my space, and the success of her event. In her retelling of the story, I had graciously offered my home and helped make her dream wedding come true. After exactly 2 weeks, on a Friday afternoon, I sent 3 separate emails. The first went to Lauren and Ben. It was the invoice for $11,100, along with all my documentation, photos, and a detailed explanation of how I'd calculated each cost. I explained that since they'd used my property as a commercial venue without permission, they were responsible for market rate fees. I also noted that they'd promised to repay the $4,000 I'd covered, and that amount was included in their total. I gave them 30 days to arrange payment, and I mentioned that I'd been advised by my lawyer that I had grounds for legal action if necessary. The second email went to my parents. I sent them a separate invoice for $2,000, representing their share of the venue usage and cleanup costs. I explained that since they'd been part of planning the event and had told me that what's mine is theirs, they were equally responsible for the costs of using my property. The third email went to my extended family members who had attended the wedding. I didn't ask them for money, but I did want them to know the truth about what had happened. I explained that I'd come home to find an unauthorized wedding in my backyard, that I'd been expected to pay for vendors, and that I was now dealing with thousands of dollars in property damage and cleanup costs. I sent photos of the damage, copies of the cleaning and landscaping bills, and a clear explanation that while I was happy Lauren had a beautiful wedding day, the way it had been handled was unacceptable. Then I waited. The response was immediate and explosive. Within an hour of sending those emails, my phone started ringing. First Lauren, then Ben, then my parents, then various aunts, uncles, and cousins. I let every single call go to voicemail. The voicemails were intense. Lauren's first message was tears and disbelief. "Haley, what is this? Why are you sending us a bill? We're family. I can't believe you're trying to charge us for my wedding day." Ben's message was angry. "This is insane, Haley. We never agreed to pay you rent for your backyard. You can't just decide after the fact that we owe you money." My mother's message was guilt and manipulation. "I'm so disappointed in you, Haley. Your sister had the most beautiful day, and now you're trying to ruin it with money. This isn't how family treats family." My father's message was dismissive. "Haley, you need to drop this nonsense immediately. We're not paying you a dime. You're being ridiculous." But the most telling responses came from my extended family members. Several of my aunts and uncles called to say they'd had no idea I hadn't known about the wedding. They'd assumed I was hosting it willingly and were shocked to learn the truth. My cousin Jane left a particularly supportive message. "Haley, I had no idea you didn't know about the wedding. When your mom told everyone you were generously hosting, we all thought you were just being modest about it. What they did was completely wrong, and you have every right to be upset." By Saturday morning, I had 47 missed calls. By Sunday evening, it was 78. I didn't answer any of them, but I did listen to the voicemails, and they were getting increasingly desperate and angry. Lauren's messages evolved from tears to anger to threats. "If you don't drop this bill, I'm never speaking to you again. You're ruining my marriage before it even starts." My parents' messages became more manipulative. "Your sister is having a breakdown over this. You're destroying our family over money. Is this really worth it?" During this time, I also started receiving text messages from various family members who had attended the wedding. Some were supportive, others were critical, and a few were just confused about what was happening. My Aunt Carol texted, "Haley, I had no idea you didn't know about the wedding beforehand. Your parents made it sound like you were just being humble about hosting. I'm so sorry this happened to you. But my Uncle Steve had a different perspective. Haley, I think you're overreacting. It was just one day, and Lauren looked so happy. Can't you just let this go for the sake of family harmony?" My cousin Mike, who had brought his 3 kids to the wedding, sent a particularly eye-opening message. "Hey Haley, I wanted you to know that my kids accidentally broke one of your garden gnomes during the reception. I looked everywhere for you that day to tell you and offered to replace it, but your mom said you were busy and would handle it later. I had no idea you weren't even supposed to be there. I'm sending you money for a replacement." That message made me realize there were probably other damages I hadn't even discovered yet. I spent an entire afternoon doing a more thorough inspection of my property and found several additional issues: a cracked planter on my back patio, scratches on my outdoor table from where they'd moved it, and several missing solar lights from my garden borders. I also discovered that they'd used my garage as a storage area for wedding supplies. When I opened it, I found leftover decorations, extra folding chairs, and several cases of wine that apparently hadn't been consumed during the reception. There was also a note taped to one of the wine cases: "Thanks for the storage space. We'll pick this up next week." Lauren and Ben. It had been 2 weeks, and they still hadn't picked up their belongings from my garage. The more I discovered, the more I realized how extensively they'd used my property. They hadn't just had a party in my backyard, they'd essentially taken over my entire home for their wedding weekend. I found evidence that people had been getting ready in multiple rooms of my house, not just the living room I'd seen. My guest bathroom had makeup stains on the vanity, my kitchen had been used for food prep beyond what the caterers had done, and someone had even used my master bedroom to store gifts and personal belongings. I started documenting these additional discoveries, adding them to my growing file of evidence. Each new finding reinforced my decision to pursue repayment. This wasn't just about principle anymore, it was about the extensive unauthorized use of my entire property. The social media aspect also became more problematic as the days went on. Lauren continued posting wedding photos, and many of them prominently featured my backyard and house. She was tagging the location as private estate wedding and posting captions about her dream venue and perfect day. Friends and acquaintances were commenting about how beautiful the location was and asking where it was so they could book it for their own events. One particularly galling post showed Lauren and Ben in my kitchen, with Lauren wearing an apron over her wedding dress and Ben laughing beside her. The caption read, "Even did some of our own cooking for the reception." When you have the perfect venue, you want to be hands-on with every detail. #DaiWedding, #DreamVenue, #perfectday. The post had 127 likes and dozens of comments from people praising their resourcefulness and asking for details about the venue rental. I screenshot every single post, adding them to my documentation file. If Lauren wanted to publicly take credit for my property and paint herself as the resourceful bride who had secured a perfect venue, then she could also publicly take responsibility for paying for that venue. By the end of the second week after sending the invoices, I had 105 missed calls. That's when Lauren showed up at my house. I was working in my garden on a Saturday morning, replanting some of the flowers that had been damaged during the wedding, when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Lauren and Ben got out of their car and marched toward my backyard. Lauren was screaming before she even reached me. "Haley, what the hell is wrong with you?" She was red-faced, crying, and angrier than I'd ever seen her. Ben was right behind her, looking equally furious. "You're destroying my life," she continued. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Ben's parents think we're scammers. Our friends think we lied to them about having permission to use your house. Everyone thinks we're horrible people. "Lauren, calm down," I said, standing up and brushing dirt off my hands. "Calm down? You sent a bill to everyone in our family. You made it sound like we broke into your house and trashed it. You're ruining everything." Ben stepped forward. "This is harassment, Haley. You can't just demand money from people after the fact. I can when they use my property without permission and damage it." "We didn't damage anything," Lauren shrieked. I gestured around my backyard, where I was still working to repair the landscaping damage. "Really? Because I've spent $1,500 fixing the flower beds alone. Those are just plants. They grow back." "Lauren, you had 76 people in my backyard without asking me. You moved my furniture, used my dishes, tracked mud through my house, and expected me to pay for your vendors. How is any of that acceptable? Because we're family." She screamed. "Family helps each other. Family asks for help. They don't just take it." Ben tried a different approach. "Look, Haley, we appreciate that you paid the vendors that night. We really do. But we never agreed to pay you back $11,000. That's crazy. The $4,000 you promised to pay back isn't crazy, though, right?" They both went quiet. "You did promise to pay me back, didn't you?" I continued. "That night, you both thanked me and said you'd pay me back as soon as possible." "We meant eventually," Lauren said, her voice getting smaller. "It's been 2 weeks. You haven't even called to talk about it. We've been busy. We just got married. You've been busy posting pictures of my backyard on social media and telling everyone about your perfect wedding." Lauren's face flushed again. "So that's what this is about? You're jealous that I had a beautiful wedding? I'm upset that you used my home without permission and then expected me to pay for the privilege. We didn't expect you to pay for anything. Then why didn't you have the money to pay your vendors?" Again, silence. Ben finally spoke up. "We're not paying your ridiculous invoice, Haley. And if you keep harassing us about it, we're going to call the police." "You're going to call the police? For what?" "Harassment. Extortion. I don't know, but this isn't legal. I pulled out my phone. Actually, Ben, let me call my lawyer right now. We can ask him about what's legal and what isn't. Don't you dare, Lauren said. Why not? If you think I'm doing something illegal, let's get a professional opinion. I started dialing Martin's number and both Lauren and Ben took a step back. Wait, Lauren said. Just wait. I paused my dialing. Yes? What do you want from us? I want you to take responsibility for what you did. Fine. We're sorry we didn't ask permission first. Are you happy? And? And what? And what are you going to do about the money you owe me? Lauren threw her hands up. We don't have $11,000, Haley. We just spent everything we had on the wedding. What about the $4,000 you promised to pay back? We don't have that either. Ben nodded. We're completely broke. The wedding wiped us out financially. I looked at both of them, my sister and her new husband, standing in my backyard, demanding that I absorb thousands of dollars in costs because they'd made poor financial decisions. So let me get this straight, I said. You planned a wedding you couldn't afford, used my house without permission as your venue, expected me to pay your vendors, and now you want me to just eat all the costs because you're broke. We didn't plan for you to pay anything, Lauren insisted. Then how were you planning to pay your vendors that night? No answer. Lauren, you told the caterer and DJ that the family would handle the final payments. You told Mom and Dad the same thing. You absolutely planned for someone else to pay your bills. That's not. We just thought. You thought what? Lauren started crying again. We thought everyone would want to help us have a beautiful wedding. Help, Lauren. Not be forced to help without being asked. I sat down on one of my patio chairs and looked at both of them. They were young, broke, and had made some really poor decisions. But they were also family, and despite everything, I didn't actually want to destroy their lives. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pay me back the $4,000 you promised to pay back. I don't care if it takes you 2 years, but you're going to set up a payment plan and stick to it. We can't afford payments right now, Ben said. Then you're going to get second jobs, sell some stuff, figure it out. You managed to come up with deposits for all your vendors, so you can figure out how to pay back money you borrowed. Lauren was still crying. What about the rest of the bill? I'm willing to forget about the venue rental fees and most of the other costs. But you're paying for the landscaping damage you caused, and you're paying me back the vendor money. How much is that total? Ben asked. $6,500. They both looked like I'd asked them for $1 million. We can't afford that, Lauren whispered. You can't afford not to pay it, I replied. Because if you don't, I'm going to pursue legal action for the full amount, plus damages, plus attorney fees. Ben looked at Lauren, then back at me. What kind of payment plan are you talking about? $200 a month for about 3 years. That's less than most people's car payments. They discussed it quietly for a few minutes while I waited. Finally, Lauren looked up at me with red, puffy eyes. If we agree to this, will you leave us alone about everything else? If you stick to the payment plan and don't miss any payments, yes. And you'll stop telling people we did something wrong? I considered this. I'll stop actively bringing it up, but I'm not going to lie if people ask me about it. Lauren nodded reluctantly. Fine. But we need the payments to start next month. We literally have no money right now. That's fine. We'll draw up an agreement, and your first payment will be due on the 1st of next month. Ben looked relieved. So we're done with this? As long as you make your payments, yes. They both nodded and turned to leave. Lauren paused at my gate and looked back at me. I really did want you to be part of my wedding day, she said quietly. Then you should have asked me to be part of it. After they left, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I was relieved that we'd reached an agreement, but sad that it had come to this. I'd always known my family had boundary issues, but I'd never imagined they'd go this far. The payment plan worked out exactly as we'd agreed. Lauren and Ben made their $200 payments every month for 3 years and 2 months. Some months the check was a few days late, but they never missed a payment entirely. My relationship with my parents took longer to repair. They were initially furious about the invoices I'd sent them, and they refused to pay anything. But after several months of minimal contact, we eventually had a long conversation about boundaries and respect. They never apologized directly, but they did start asking permission before making assumptions about using my help or my property. Lauren and I are on good terms now, though our relationship is different than it was before. She's more respectful of my boundaries, and I'm more clear about my expectations. She's never directly apologized for the wedding situation, but she's never presumed to use my property without asking again, either. The most interesting outcome was with my extended family. Several relatives reached out after receiving my email to say they were appalled by what had happened and supportive of my response. It turns out that many of them had their own stories about Lauren and my parents overstepping boundaries, and my situation helped them recognize some problematic patterns they'd been overlooking. My cousin Jane now regularly jokes about pulling a Haley when she needs to set boundaries with difficult family members. My Uncle Tom mentioned that my email inspired him to have a conversation with his own son about taking responsibility for his actions. 3 years later, I still live in the same house, and my backyard is more beautiful than ever. I've hosted several family gatherings since then, but only ones that I've planned and invited people to attend. Lauren and Ben seem to have learned from the experience. They bought their own small house about a year after the payment plan was completed, and they've been much more financially responsible. Lauren got a full-time job in retail management, and Ben was promoted to assistant manager at his store. Last month, they asked if they could host Ben's parents for a barbecue in my backyard for his father's birthday. They offered to pay for all the food, handle all the setup and cleanup, and limit the guest list to 12 people. I said yes, and it was a lovely, stress-free event. The key difference was that they asked. I learned a lot about myself through this experience. I learned that I'd been enabling my family's entitled behavior for years by always being the one to compromise, always being the one to help without being asked, always being the one to smooth things over when there were problems. I also learned that setting boundaries isn't about being mean or selfish, it's about requiring people to treat you with basic respect. I didn't ask Lauren and Ben to pay me back because I needed the money, though $6,500 was certainly significant. I asked them to pay me back because they needed to understand that their actions had consequences. The most important thing I learned was that you can love your family and still hold them accountable for their behavior. In fact, holding them accountable might be one of the most loving things you can do, because it gives them the opportunity to grow and become better people. Would I handle the situation differently if it happened again? Honestly, probably not. I think I found the right balance between protecting myself and preserving family relationships. I held my ground on the important issues while still being flexible enough to maintain connections with people I care about. The only thing I might do differently is to have had clearer boundaries from the beginning. If I'd been more direct about my expectations over the years, Lauren and my parents might never have assumed they could use my property without asking. But then again, maybe some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Today, my backyard is hosting exactly one person, me. I'm sitting on my patio with a cup of coffee, enjoying the flowers I replanted 3 years ago, and feeling grateful for the peace and quiet. And if anyone in my family wants to join me, all they have to do is ask.